I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. We will begin with the traditional call of the roll. I think we've got everybody but Gary Steen, who's excused. Yeah. So we will put that in the notes. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Johnson seconds. Any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, aye.
Aye.
Any, any opposed? Motion passes. On to public comments. I recognize everybody in the room. I think we don't have anyone here. I don't think we got any sent in. So report of the county manager.
All right, good afternoon. Let's see. So purchase orders over 4,000, I swear, like I must look at these 100 times, but that actually went in the county. Oh, I'm looking at the county board agenda. Never mind. What am I talking about?
That's when I started. So
Good thing you guys thought I could do this. Okay. So review of the county board agenda while I was close. All right. So relatively straightforward. County manager will do the purchase orders, talk a little bit about the newly proposed TID district that we'll talk about a little bit later here in this afternoon, as well as the local assistance and tribal consistency fund money, which we have applied for. Then it will be the opportunity for the board to get a final look at the 2023 budget. There are a couple of resolutions coming forward from child support. And then there will be a presentation of the Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District public hearing report. And anticipated there will be maybe perhaps some lively comments before that. And then a series of 3 budget adjustment resolutions. So last month, I included a budget adjustment on the agenda. I included indication of a budget adjustment for the sheriff's department and the health department, and included the paperwork for another budget adjustment for highway, veterans, human services, CJC, and public health. And then I failed to include the budget adjustment for that group and gave you anyway. So the long story short is I'm bringing both of them back to make sure we've got it covered, and all the resolutions will be included in the packet. So unfortunately, I didn't want to further confuse things and combine them, as well as the current ones from October, and create a situation in which there was additional confusion. So you will have to do 3 rounds of roll call vote. I apologize for that. It could I'm just making an excuse, but partly it comes from not having an August board meeting. So there were actions that happened in August. There are actions that happened in September, and then now there's October's. And then the last thing will be a resolution adopting the 2023 pay grid and other pay related items, health insurance premiums. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question. Is the Tainter Lake public hearing in place of, or is that where other public comments will happen, or is there? I don't see a public comment part at the top.
Oh, good catch. That's why this is a draft.
I just didn't know if that was a hearing or if that had to do with it, but.
No, that's a good catch.
Well, and we're going to have to, I think, have some discussion.
Yeah, we're going to
about
have some
exactly how to
discussion
handle
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hearing actually occurred, and now you're receiving a report from that hearing. So there's a statutory process to the development of a lake district, and it includes the requirement for a petition to be filed, then a public hearing to be held, and then there a 90-day period during which a report regarding that hearing is prepared and then presented to the county board. And then the county board has 90 days after that to take action upon it. Did I say that right, Nick?
Yes.
All right. So this would be the actual presentation of that report from the public hearing. All right. Department head meeting summary. I just wanted to take a moment to say that I think I have officially worked my way through all of the department heads in the county and meeting with them individually, and whenever possible, seeing their space and meeting whatever staff happened to be available on whatever day that I was there. And I just want you to know that, well, two resounding kind of truths come from that for me. One is, in spite of 30-some years, actually 37 years of public service, I am blown away by all of the things that we do. And like, I thought I knew all of that stuff. And I mean, at some level, I did know a lot of it. But when you actually get a chance to sit down and people showcase what they do, we do a lot of stuff. And so the second part of that is that I can say without an exception that every single department head that I spoke with is committed. They're knowledgeable, they're invested, they're supportive of their staff. They are, they believe that Dunn County is a good place to be, a good place to work. They want us to be successful. It was very, very, and not to diminish it, but very, very heartwarming to just see the level of dedication of the people that you all are a part of overseeing and all of the work that we do. And so I just wanted you to know that even in spite of all of these years of watching it, seeing it through different eyes, only made stronger the belief that I have that this is a great place to work and we have amazing, amazing people working here. Nobody was growly, nobody was complaining, nothing. It was good. Quick update. So Gary Steen has been your representative to the Chippewa St. Croix Rail Commission. That group's been meeting on a regular basis with the intent of looking at running rail through the Chippewa Valley. And they are at the point of where they are looking for some small financial commitment on the part of people that are interested, at least in staying in the discussion, or entities that are interested in staying in the discussion. So they've asked for a $3,000 commitment on the part of the municipalities and counties that are involved. Some have moved forward with that. Some are in the process of moving forward with that. Some have not yet addressed that within their decision-making group, but Gary and I are working together to bring a contingency request to the Committee on Administration here in a couple of weeks for that $3,000. It seems like it's a nominal cost to sort of stay in the discussion. It doesn't commit us to anything beyond that, but it does allow us to kind of be a part of its seed money, essentially, for continued planning on moving forward. Any questions about that? The other thing that I thought it was important that you know was that there is, if you weren't aware, proposed creation of another tax increment district. So we just closed one. Or one just closed at the end or in 2021 or early 2022, actually. And so now there is a proposed creation of a new one. It essentially is a pretty large TID, runs from by the airport around kind of just to the south and east of us, and then through to the old or the currently unused golf course, Chippewa Valley Golf Course, and includes that property. About 38% of that TID is focused on developing housing options. And so the final city council decision is on Monday night. And then the joint review board, which kind of makes the final determination, then I think is a week later, roughly a week later.
That
So-
sounds right. And I believe that Menominee has two more TIDs that are pretty close to
Closing.
to closing. So
Yes, yes, yes. Any questions about that? Good thing you don't have any questions, because that's about all that I understand about that.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, I'm directing this question to the chair. Do they have, does the city have any specific interest from industry here, or is this just a kind of longer range plan?
So my understanding, this got rolling before I joined city council. But my understanding is that the majority of it is about long range planning, but I know that there's at least one possible housing development that would be in that TID area that is very interested in taking advantage of that financing. And that's going to be one of the questions that we will be discussing going forward, assuming that the TID is approved.
Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Being we're talking TID districts, the district in Boyceville did get approved by the joint committee about a week and a half ago up there. And that one is, they do have mostly business, people looking to, either expand or to come up there with, business. And so they were pretty much in a hurry because they've got some people with some timelines and, they were waiting to hear. So nothing huge, but it sounds good for what they're.
Thank you for covering that for us, by the way.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And then lastly, last week we received information from the Treasury Department, Federal Treasury Department, indicating that any county or municipality that had received payment in lieu of taxes, had any kind of federal payment, would receive a local assistance and tribal consistency fund payment, which is ARPA money or COVID money flowing down through. There was a minimum payment amount established, which was $50,000. So we will receive $50,000 in 2022, I'm sorry, and 2023. And it was a little confusing, but it looked like there was some potential, depending on how it spends playing out, that it could continue on as long as 2027. So it's not a ton of money. Beata and I made an executive decision because we haven't seen it yet, and it's in the process to put it into next year's budget. But it doesn't have to go there. It's just that it's relatively nominal amount of money, but still, it'll take $100,000. And didn't have to do anything except it literally took Sarah Stabenow about 2 minutes on the Treasury Department's website.
Yeah, my understanding is that there were two qualifying factors, and one was the in lieu of taxes, and the other one was something about federal land conservation within the county. So
Yes.
That's it.
And I believe that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for the county manager? All right. Make sure I'm on the right agenda. Yeah, okay. So 6 reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. That doesn't do that. All right. So first, resolution approving FY 2022 budget adjustments for Sheriff's Department, Health Department from August. So do we need to run these through again?
Well, so again, you essentially approved There were two. You approved one and had the paperwork for the other, didn't approve one and or had the paperwork for one and approved the other, however that makes sense.
Yep.
It just felt cleanest.
Yep.
To say you have all of the information in one spot and know that you have the right process and documentation to support it.
Yep, and voice vote here and then roll call at the county level.
I don't even believe, do you need to do a voice vote here? Nick, do you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're coming up to the county board as well.
Oh, from through executive.
Yep.
Yep, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, do I have a motion for the first of these, the budget adjustment for Sheriff's Department Health and
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse, Supervisor Bonds? Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Supervisor Zons. I saw Vaughn's hand go up out of the corner of my eye. So my apologies. Okay, second one of these, budget adjustment for Highway, Veteran Services, Human Services, CJCC, and Health Department. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Johnson, do I have a second? Supervisor Kinnear. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, and I saw Mike's lips move with the aye, so any opposed? Motion passes. Third one, resolution approving FY 2022 budget adjustments for Health Department and Human Services for October.
Right, and this would be the one that you have not previously seen.
Yep, so let me get a motion first.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Supervisor Morehouse, second by Supervisor Calabrese. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, that gets us through 6. Now, review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the County Board and Standing Committee. Judiciary and Law, resolution supporting increased child support funding. Supervisor Calabrese, do you want to address that, or would
Sure,
you?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mike, thank you. Thank you.
What?
Yeah, the Judiciary and Law. The Judiciary and Law Committee approved to pass along this resolution to the Executive Committee from Child Support. And basically it is, if I understand correctly, an increase in where did it go? That's not it. It's federal funding coming in to the Child Support Agency and 9.7 million in additional federal funding each year. And the investment will ensure that Wisconsin counties can continue to effectively provide economic support to the children. It has no impact on the budget or the proposed budget of 2023. It's just accepting those funds, I guess. And I would move that we approve it. If we have to.
No, this one's just the review.
Okay.
Resolution rescinding 2016-98. Does anyone want to take a crack at explaining that? I was thinking that might be you, Nick, rather than.
And the previous resolution was styled as coming from the executive committee. It probably should have gone to the legislative committee, but they weren't meeting until November. But I think it would be appropriate, so I can either amend it to show that it comes from Judiciary and Law, or if you want to vote on it here, we can. I think either one's appropriate. The action's been approved by the committee. So there's that. And now this one. One of the things we've been working on this year is in connection with our pay grids and so forth, is working with our deputy medical examiners to give them a little more equity in their pay. Unfortunately, in 2016, and at the time it wasn't unfortunate, but in retrospect, we tied our hands a little. Their wages were set by a county board resolution, so there is no flexibility in changing the wages, increasing them or whatever. So all this does is it rescinds the previous resolution that set the wages for the deputy medical examiners. They've been working, HR's been working on, having them incorporated into the new pay grid at equitable rates based on, good information and evaluation of what the position requires. And so that's the way that they're proposing it be handled going forward. So it rescinds conflicting language from what we're trying to accomplish now.
Gives us flexibility, puts them in the
Yes.
pay grade. Yeah, makes entirely good sense. Anyone have any questions on that?
I have a stupid question. Why is the medical examiner's salary schedule treated differently than other departments? That's the part I'm entirely in favor of this, but why is this, was it handled so much differently?
Because
Our HR director's here.
Oh, she is.
Sorry,
Jenna.
I'll just start out and just say quickly, the positions, the deputy medical examiners are like on call.
Right.
So some weeks they may never work, some weeks they may work a lot. And so it was all oriented toward striking a balance, to give them fair pay for the work they're doing, but also recognizing that very often they won't be doing work. They must be available to work if they're called on. So that's in essence what it was.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but just my understanding of the history was prior to 2016, it was more of a per diem type structure where they were paid if they went to a call. And in 2016, there was a review, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, done on that structure, and it moved to being paid $10 per hour for like their scheduled 24-hour periods for being on call. And then, so they get $10 per hour, no matter what they respond to. Maybe they won't get a call. Maybe they'll get 5 calls. And so that was kind of the change at the time, and in the form of a resolution from the Judiciary and Law Committee. So
It was
Like
it was a pretty significant reorganization. So we had a medical examiner and then a deputy medical examiner who was somebody who helped when the help was needed. And about the same time, we entered into a cooperative agreement with Eau Claire County to provide medical examiner services for them as well. And so we created some new classification or we called these unclassified positions. They weren't eligible for all the same benefits, and their wages were set by the resolution, like I said, in recognition of the balance between, feast or famine type work. So they're either busy or they're not doing anything. But they still have to be paid for it. And, they can't run to South Dakota for the weekend because they need to be available to handle things. And so now we're doing it differently. We're putting it in a pay grid and moving it up with, county board action to change wages. And so it'll be incorporated. It just be handled differently.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, this was a quicker way to give them a better deal at the time, and was perhaps not the most optimum way to get there.
In 2016, it was probably not a bad
Yeah,
setup, but that was a while ago, and the cost of living has increased significantly. So, and people are looking for more stability in their work. And
thank you, Jenna. You
unfortunately,
can probably make a
business
break for it. Okay. Any further discussion? All right, Planning Resource Development, Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District Public Hearing Report to County Board for consideration. Supervisor Quinn,
Mr. Lang's gonna have to help me a little on this, I think.
I'll try.
Okay, so the process has been, we've sort of struggled a little bit to make sure we're following process and understand what our role is. But what it comes down to is that the board accepted the petitions and referred it to the PRD committee to develop a report, hold a public hearing and develop a report on the hearing. The public hearing was held. We did probably a month or more, a month and a half of consideration of the report that was developed by staff, sort of answering some questions that were raised in the hearing, providing more data. And that all has been compiled into which I think will be in the board packet, and it's all been compiled into probably 30 pages by the time it's done report. So our job, so we spend a lot of time sort of trying to be prudent and accessible in discussing the elements of the report. But what it comes down to is that here's as a committee determined at its meeting yesterday. What it comes down to is that our job is to present the report to the board. And if we chose, we could add some considerations that we had decided. For example, there were 4 criteria in the statute that we needed to assess, the board needs to assess as to whether the district is a viable decision. So we looked at those 4 criteria, and they were, for example, let's see, what was it? Do they have required signatures? And of course, the clerk has reviewed the signatures, determined that there are sufficient signatures to meet the criteria of the statute, so that was met. Does it address a problem and a necessary problem that needs to get addressed? I think anyone who knows Lake Tainter knows that there's problems that need to get addressed, and this is designed to get to them. Does it provide public benefit, environmental, let's see, public, economic, does this address any health need? And the committee felt that it did accomplish that. We were, I guess, disappointed that the applicants had decided to focus their initial PR materials on a narrow set of tools that were pretty controversial. But the reality is that there are problems that need to be solved that forming a district could solve. And so that in our opinion, they met that criteria. And then would it benefit the property owners? And I think it's clear that if the conditions in the lake were improved, which is the purpose of the district, that it would benefit the property values for sure, and the enjoyment of the lake or the residents. So we felt that it felt all 4 of those. So our job then is to present the report to the board, perhaps provide some of this level of background, although a lot of the stuff is dealt with in the report. And then we are going to ask that the board again remit, and I should say this too, that the committee decided that we would recommend that the district be approved. But that's up to the board to do that. It's just a recommendation. It has no formal weight at all. And we're happy to discuss that with people. But what we'd be asking the board to do is accept the report and return it to or return the issue back to the committee for development of a formal order that the board would pass to establish, board would consider and have to pass by a majority vote to establish the district. So it would come back to the PRD committee. We would develop a formal resolution, sort of confirming that it be in the form of an order, establishing the district, setting the boundaries. And there are some things, for example, there are public properties that are included in the map they gave us that we will be recommending be excluded from the final order. Nominating the initial board of directors. We have the board has the ability to nominate three initial members of the board that will serve for 3 months. So the committee will provide some recommendations to the board to consider for who might be on that initial board. And I think there are a couple of, I think that's actually about it, what the order will contain. So that's the work we have to do at the board meeting. And we were a little unclear about what format we should propose that. I mean, whether we should draft a formal resolution or whether we just babble on like I am right now at the meeting. I don't know, your thoughts about that, Nick?
Yeah. No, my recommendation was, because it's largely parliamentary, it's receipt of a report and approval of it, or the adoption of it. If the county board wants to make all the words in it their own. And then, recommit it, or, send it back to the committee for the remaining work, which is to put together the order. It's almost all drafted already. At least, a proposed one, and then recruit and vet and nominate people to be on the initial board of directors.
And if I'm looking at the timeline correctly, we should have a meeting January 18th, which would be the last day we would have available to finish the process. So we should have
Yeah, you have a 90-day timeline.
So we do have a committee meeting, an appropriate committee meeting within the timeline. So remitting it back isn't going to require a special meeting.
Is that right, Chase?
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chase. I
Yeah, I was
should have said Chase will take care of this.
Well, I figure if we get to we may get, drag you up here.
Well, yeah, so that's the gist of what we're going to be reported, the report, and I guess the request to remit back to committee. And how much, so I'm not sure how else you want to handle it other than that. Nothing. I mean, it's, yeah.
I don't believe that there's any additions, actions.
So we may have public comments at the beginning of the meeting about it. I mean, what's a little bit perplexing about this process is that we did have and I'll just say this stuff because you may get asked about it. So we had a bit of a problem with holding a public hearing, and our policy generally is that the only testimony on that issue that is relevant is, or that can be, it can be included in the discussion, is what comes out of the public hearing. So we have people who commented in person and people who submitted written comments. But of course, this process is going to go on for another 9 months, practically 6 months, more or more. And in that time, we have certainly got a number of people who have wanted to share their thoughts, continue to share their thoughts. And they may share them in public comment. Normally, we don't allow them to do that, but I'd suggest probably that we we can accept, I don't know, what do you think, Dick? Is that?
That was a thing I needed to talk
Yeah,
with you
yeah.
about, was whether that was.
Yeah, it's definitely worth discussing. The board, we have a board rule that says that public comment can't be addressed to items that have been already subject to a public hearing. But with all board rules, it could be subject to a motion to suspend a rule in the circumstances that are presented, you know.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that's gonna be after the meeting, you and I need to sit down with Chris and have a conversation about
Yeah.
how that might work. Chase, is there anything you want to add, or would you rather, okay.
Specific question, I'm happy to answer.
All right, so, yes, Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you consider that, is think about the last time when we did allow comments and there were inaccuracies in the comments. So if myself as a board member recognize that, okay, here are some comments, but they may or may not be accurate. Some way that we all would need to be told that, or I don't know how you're going to deal with it, but just something to consider.
That is the big concern, is that with a public hearing, people are sworn in, but with public comment, they are not. And
Also,
so-
the information presented at the hearing was reviewed by the committee and by staff. And in the report, there are some clarifications of what people commented on, not very many, but a few.
Yeah, I am generally in favor of public comment, but I'm not sure it's going to be appropriate for this one. We'll have to.
I gotta say this, that we have had public comment at committee meetings like we always do. And we have not prohibited people from speaking on this. We haven't gotten very many people. There have been some written comments and we have had a few people come and talk, but it hasn't been a heated discussion.
Okay.
It's been pretty, what do you guys think? Is that how you?
I don't know. I mean, because as you say, we've taken public comment in committee. I mean, it seems to me that we have vetted these comments. We've listened to people who have concerns about it. And we have a formal process. So I would be concerned about giving public comment to people who have opinions that might in that venue carry more weight than the kinds of comments and opinions that have been vetted by our staff and in committee and so on. I've got some concerns about just opening it up. It has been somewhat controversial.
I mean, the other way to think about it is that we will not be deciding anything on Wednesday. We're simply refer back to committee. So I suspect people will try and find ways to wedge their opinion into committee meetings that we can limit to some degree, but it'll happen. But also, it's going to come back to the board for a decision in January, and that may be where there may be some more consideration of where we're at.
Any further discussion? It's not an action item, just a. Supervisor Headland.
Yeah, I agree with you. The thing I like about almost, I don't want to say promote, but almost tell the people that this is going back to you for the final presentation that will be coming to the board, which allows your committee to look at any and consider any public comment. Where I mean, we would have time also at this first meeting because there's going to be another meeting, but I like you say, it hasn't been a ton of people. I wonder if it shouldn't just go to the committee. And then that gives you that ability to decide if those comments should be included. If there's something that's
Yeah, we,
totally off the wall
we-
by somebody, some made up science or something,
well,
you know, we don't want to consider that.
I mean, I'd say we have decided not to include anything on advice from council, that anything other than in the report, anything other than the comments that were made at the public hearing. And of course, the report includes information about what staff's and the committee's research on whether those points are accurate or not.
Yes, I mean, we do have a rule in place for this. And as Nick said, there is the possibility of suspending the rule, but I think that's going to be the discussion we'll have to have.
Yeah.
If I can, Mr.
Supervisor
Chair.
Calabrese.
Thank you. Tom, did you say, or did you infer, or is it just that you think that the committee is going to eventually approve this, or was that decision didn't happen yet, but
The
did you
committee
say-
doesn't really have any, as far as the statute goes, the committee doesn't have a role in approving or denying it. It has a role of presenting the report and then bringing it, and then the board will have the final decision about whether to approve or not. So we won't be, we decided to make it, I don't know if it was just sort of informal. I think Supervisor Kinnear made a really good point at our meeting where he said, you know, it very well may be that people are going to want to know, what did you decide? Is this a good idea or a bad idea? And to the degree they might do that, I think we could say that the committee did vote that they were in support, that they had met the 4 criteria, and we were in support of it.
Okay.
You don't agree, Diane?
And so,
yeah,
That's all we get
okay,
to do.
yeah.
That's our job.
Yeah.
That's our only job.
and so your concern for this meeting's public comment is that the public might either give faulty information or try to stop this step of the process and say, I urge you not to send it back to that
Yeah,
committee.
they may have the impression that we are gonna, even though the agenda won't say this, that we are gonna act on approval of this. And if they do, they may feel this is my last chance to get my word in on it, you know.
Okay,
What they should know, as Kelly said, they should know that there will be, and the board's gonna decide this in January, most likely, so. And I don't expect that there's gonna be, I mean, I don't know, it seems like it'll be okay.
Yeah, and the other contention is just that normally we don't allow further public comment after a public hearing. So that's just,
People have been
Uh,
very civil
yeah.
and civic about the whole thing.
Nick, I saw you turn your mic on.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna remind you all, it ends up being ultimately, it's kind of a quasi judicial decision. And there are findings that relate to the 4 elements that Supervisor Quinn outlined earlier. And, you know, and it isn't really a personal preference or emotional response, and those kinds of things really aren't germane to those decisions. And so I think to some extent at this point, you know, additional comment is going to be oriented in that direction or in that nature, you know. I ask you not to vote for it, or I think you should vote for it, because the rest of the stuff can't be considered anymore. It's not evidence. It's not sworn testimony. So, you know, it may be, it's a simple matter of trying to determine whether the 4 elements are fulfilled or not. And if you find that they are, you're going to have to approve it.
Mhm.
Chair McCullough, could I just ask, is there a way as you consider the county board meeting, because the agenda won't go out until tomorrow morning? Is there a way to indicate in the action, in the consideration of resolutions, reports, and ordinances, something that might mitigate some of the pushback? I mean, do we want to be more clear about the recommendation coming forward? I'm just laying that out there as a possibility as people look at the agenda, that 300 people don't show up expecting that there's going to be a vote on whether or not to establish a lake district next Wednesday.
Supervisor Headland.
I think the wording, some of the wording should be that just what you initially proposed. And in other words, this is a decision by the board determining whether we have any questions on your report, just on that report. And if we have no questions on that report, it goes back then for final, the next step. What do you think, Nick? Does that sound?
I think something like that, maybe put, receive report of committee on public hearing or something, for the Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District. So put report up front. It says consideration. I mean, I agree with you. I think it would be unfortunate if many people misunderstood what was going to happen and they came to something that they weren't expecting.
Could you actually just have the wording? Please note, we will not be taking a vote on creating the Tainter
Yes.
Lake District as part of this meeting.
Well, that'd be way too soon.
You could do that. There's no reason that you couldn't do that.
Because that would, that,
This meeting.
yeah, at this meeting, that will occur at a future meeting, something like that. That hopefully, if people actually read the agenda before they show up.
Well, I think some people do. And I think that if you think of the purpose of an agenda, to be clear with the public around what is going to be acted upon or not, that kind of clarity would be too straightforward.
And I'll do the public service of posting it to a couple of the Tainter Lake Facebook groups where everybody's talking about this, to say that this will be on the agenda. Just note that there's no need to show up and have public comment about it, because we will not be voting on the creation. It's just to get the presentation of the report from that particular standing committee.
I would suggest that you not discourage people from coming, but simply tell them.
No, that's right.
Let them, I mean, don't say, you don't need to come to this meeting.
Stay away.
Don't, yeah, exactly. No, you just say, the vote on whether or not the Lake District will be created won't be held until January.
Okay.
Something like that.
So- So if the language stayed as it is with Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District, public hearing report for county board consideration, and then note, we will not be taking a vote on establishment of a lake district at this meeting. Something to the future.
That, or,
I think
for
that's-
consideration, and referral back to PRND for formulation of a resolution to be looked at the January meeting. Something like that. Oh, sorry.
No,
Supervisor Kinnear.
No, are we finished with that? I
Uh,
just wanted to comment, Supervisor Quinn said that things were friendly and everything else. And one of the reasons it has been is because of the way he's led the PRD and dealt with the people and before and after, and the thoughtful process that he's painstakingly made me go through and quell my impatience. No, he's been a big part of that.
The other thing that I think that weighs into that, and I believe that Supervisor Kinnear would say this as well, is the preparation on the part of Chase and his staff in terms of being proactive of answering questions and anticipating what might be needed by the committee.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Chase and Heather have done a really, really nice job on guiding us through the sort of labyrinthine process here. So they need lots of kudos.
All right, do we have any further discussion on the Tainter Lake District? All right. Item C, 7C, Committee on Administration Resolution adopting 2023 pay grids and health insurance premiums.
Okay, committee met,
Mike.
I was too. Yeah, we met a couple of times in September. The first one was to just review the audit that came to that we passed on to you. And the second one then was to our regular monthly meeting that same week, and we discussed a lot of things about future of what we wanted to do and presenting of wages. And we had a lot of good recommendations that came to us ahead of time. Again, a lot of work that was done by Jenna and her staff and I think probably beyond that into the departments. And so what we did is pass on the recommendations, and I guess to highlight that is that the pay grid, we always refer to the steps in the pay grid are leaving them, there are 23 grades and 11 steps in each one. And the increase in pay that we're looking at recommending is a 3.5% for the middle of those steps. And then along with offering, we're going back, make sure that for those people who are deserving, that they would be bumped up a step, and that's another 2.75%. So you would, in a sense, add the two together, and that is what the proposed increase for the coming 2023 year would be. Along with that, we did a review. We did approve or didn't approve ourselves, but it was a pre-approved and brought to our attention that we had given an appropriate raise across the group that works in the highway department to kind of get them caught up. They were getting into that position where they were starting to lose some good people, and we had to make note of the fact that we weren't competitive wage wise. And so that did kick in there. That's something ahead of time. It isn't going to affect what they'll all be part of this raise also. Along with that, we discussed things like accrued liability, which is, in other words, the amount of money we owe people that for leave of absence possibilities, but more importantly, vacation time they've accrued and so forth. And we got a figure of about $2.6 million. And I guess my thought in the 2.6 million is that just something, that's why we have a fund balance, is that we have to be able to cover that. We don't know, again, especially nowadays where people leave in almost groups at times. Some of the departments have gotten caught off guard and stung pretty well on their budgets, but the money is there, and that's why it's there. And so we move past that. Beyond that, part of the thing also here is health insurance. We had some good reports on health insurance and health insurance premiums. And that again was there in writing for you to review, and will be, for the whole board. We've had that information now for a while. So we passed all that on and thought that the homework had been done properly. And Betty was all in favor of letting you know that we feel it, should get to the county board and be considered and passed. Thank you. That's it.
Anyone have any questions? Got to keep looking up and make sure I keep Mike. Hearing none. Right, consideration of actions to be taken by the executive committee, review and recommendation of draft FY 2023 budget. Chris, do you wanna, Beata?
I'll start us off with a PowerPoint presentation. So that was emailed it to you sometimes a couple of days ago, last week. And then it was just brought to my attention that one slide has a little typo, so I'll point that out as we kind of move along. Fairly slight typo. So then I'll do a share screen and see if I can do this right. Hmm. Well, I'm sharing everything, huh? Let's see if I can minimize that, and let's go into a presentation mode. Okay. So in this PowerPoint, we brought in few slides that you've seen last time we've met, but this just to reiterate, revisit where we were at. So this executive committee, our objective here is to kind of overview of what is the county levy limit and some of the debt, and some of it might be redundant, but it's there for you to look at as well, to consider as you're kind of making some of those, taking actions today. So there's the overview of our county general fund balance and what are the trends. Also, the proposed 2023 budget. Last time we've met, the directive was from this committee to decrease the budget deficit by $250,000. We've kind of went through in fine detail. We also had some decreases in the budget department's program summary reviews, and you'll see those as well. We also had decrease in position requests, and we also eliminated a vacant position to help close that gap. And also decrease in personnel expenses, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more in detail, what that's all about. So that is our objective and ultimately the executive committee actions. So just a quick synopsis of where we are at with the levy limit and our debt. So we're standing pretty well as far as our levy limit. And we also doing favorably well with our debt, what's outstanding and where we actually fit with the unused debt. And our score or rating from Standard & Poor's Global Rating Agency. So this is kind of like our financial position at this point. So we also looked at our fund balance from using our latest 2021 audit report. So our fund balance is at that 17.2 million, which increased significantly. Again, is because we have had some departments that put back in the fund balance, and majority of that was due to additional funding through ARPA, COVID, and so on. And then, of course, you know, this new normal of COVID and when new additional grants that came through in addition to ARPA funds. I just want to make it clear. And then where we are at with the percentage wise with the unassigned fund balance to our general fund expenses. So that's really favorable, recommended. It's at about that 33%. So we're at 60%. So we're doing really well there. And then here I kind of narrowed it down again, what made up that 4.8 million that came back to the general fund. A lot of it was human services, neighbors of Dunn, and other department savings of 1.7 million. So that was one of really good years, and a lot of it had to do with the additional funding that we were able to pick up. So here are kind of also summarized, you know, this is what you saw already, where we are at in comparison, how we've been trending with our unassigned fund balance and where we are trending with our debt over time. Because in the preceding slides, I try to give you an idea as to if we take debt, if we don't take debt, if we take this amount of debt, what would that mean to our debt ratio? So I've prepared some scenarios for you to consider. So what did executive committee here give us a directive to decrease that $4.75 million deficit we had last time we've met? So here's the things that we've done that management has taken action. So, and again, we eliminated one position request that was submitted by the sheriff's office. And that one position that was eliminated is the one that didn't bring the funding. I believe.
No, it was the recreational officer.
It was the recreational officer. I
Yes.
stand corrected. Thank
Yes.
you. We also eliminated one vacant position in admin. There was some restructuring between IT. We've had a vacancy that we were trying to figure out, how we're going to allocate that staff. And then when we've learned that, hey, we need to be more tighter with our budget, we've decided we're just going to not fill it, eliminate it. We have enough. We still need to restructure, but we're in a really good position.
It was the county manager's personal chef.
I know, personal assistant, no. Okay, travel agency, all that. So the other significant changes that took place is that we've updated our state revenue operating expenses based on the most current information we have available. When we originally prepared this, a lot of it was estimating based on what we currently got or have received in the past. But now that we've in pretty much the majority of the year, we have a better idea where we are standing. So we've updated that. We also analyze our vacancy positions in reference to health benefits. We have a lot of vacant positions. So originally we made the assumption that if we fill them, we don't know what benefits they're going to select. If they're going to do family, single, or if they're not going to elect to any at all. So we made the assumption that majority of the population is going to take family, just to kind of put us in a safer position because of that unknown. So, but what we did is we look back and ask that question is, out of that whole population that we do have right now, how many of them actually enroll in and in what benefits, those that are eligible? And the data has revealed to us that about 50% of those current employees that are eligible elected for family benefit, 25 elected for single, and 10 did not elect at all. So then we went through our vacant and we've applied this methodology to then project out of that whole population of that vacant positions that are benefits eligible. We applied this methodology to help us kind of decrease the cost. Of course, there's that risk. We don't know if somebody's going to come in and what benefits they'll have. But again, we went based on how we've been trending. And then also, we've looked at the vacancy ratio position, meaning that out of this vacant population, how many of them, what is the turnover rate? So we've looked at historically, we were at about 6%, and we've set down and we've estimated to be about that 2.82% on the safe, being on the safe. So at any given time, we would anticipate that we would have a vacancy that actually we are not paying money until it's filled. So out of that whole pool, about that 2.82%. And we increased that from 2% to kind of help us close the gap. And the other one, the last one, is we decrease the overall staffing by transitioning contracted personnel to county. And we did that for facilities and transit. So there is some savings. What happened was originally when the budget was submitted, it was that expense was under contracted line versus above, which was the employee wages and benefits. So when we've transitioned them, we made sure that it was budget neutral as possible. And that was the case for transit. For facilities, by making that transition, we did have some savings because the rate, what we were able to offer versus what we were paying. There is some additional expense to make if this was to be approved, we call it a buyout price. Because one agency says, hey, you're taking our employees, you need to pay some sort of, so we looked at both of these contracts. And we've made that assumption that approximately, I want to say 8,000 or so is going to be that expense, but that still saved us additional 29,000. So there's that saving. Every bit counts. And a lot of departments, they've really went through, and Chris and I and my team and Sarah Stabenow, we all went through line by line into these and made these appropriate changes. So a lot of effort. So then on what it is, I wanted for you to see side by side what we've originally submitted to you and this new on today. As you see, you were asking for a quarter, but we end up decreasing the deficit by 1.5 million. Okay, so a lot of it is a moving target based on those items that I've outlined here. Okay. So, but that still leaves us a variance of 3.2 million that we need to close or balance the budget. So here we've kind of went through some scenarios. I mean, of course, it is this committee's decision to pick what's right or what's the best. But I wanted to highlight some scenarios for you to consider if you like. So we have a proposed budget deficit of 3.2 million. One scenario would be to apply fund balance toward the whole deficit. But if we do, what does that mean to our fund balance? Where are we going to be with the ratio? So if that's the case, right now we are at 60.6. If the option, if you were to decide to fund this with that additional 3.2, this would bring down our fund balance to the proposed budget expenses to 49.37. It's significant change, but it still is above that recommended. Scenario 2 would be to apply the fund balance towards the wages. And I believe part of the attachment, we've provided you a summary of by department. So you can then balance your numbers too. So 2.014 is a fund balance that will go towards the salary wages. And then also use ARPA to cover the new position if those were to get approved. And then also use ARPA for the operating of 902 and no debt. Okay, so also I'll get to that slide too, but also to kind of think about the ARPA and the CIP that have already taken place, been approved. So any movement with ARPA will impact the CIP for 2024. Okay.
Yeah, can I just interject
Sure.
before you switch slides?
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure that you're clear in your head, because I had to stop and I said, okay, Beata, so I have to understand this ratio percentage number. What is that saying? And it's essentially saying that we have fund balance right now. We have fund balance to cover 60% of our expenses. If we stop taking in $1 today, we could go for 60% of the year and cover that cost. And then you'll see as we move through these scenarios, as you spend more of that fund balance, how much that drops. But just so that, because sometimes we toss these around and I'm like, well, what does that really mean? So
scenario 2, I've also highlighted, well, what would that mean to the fund balance if we only, took that 2 million? And that would be 53.67 from the 60.6%. And again, it will have that impact on that CIP that we put together. So then scenario 3 is to apply the deficit towards the increase in salaries and fringes, and use fund balance to cover the new positions, and then issue debt and no use of ARPA. So if we do that, then what happens to our general obligation debt? So here it will go up from 17.2. This is our impact on the general obligation debt to the debt limit. And I base this limit off of our 2021. Just to have an in comparison, what would that mean? And then scenario 4 is to really apply whatever ARPA we have left after the CIP got approved, and then issue debt for the remaining balance. And then so if we do that, this will have impact again on the CIP that we were looking at a few months ago. And of course, that's going to impact our debt obligation and our ratio. So we've kind of highlighted some of the, best scenarios there. One, you might look at option 1, but we wanted to put out there so that if that was the route. Scenario 5 would be, do a combination of all 3. Use a little bit of ARPA, a little bit of fund balance, and somewhat of a debt. And then the 6th scenario is issue debt for the whole thing. And what would that mean to our, debt obligation ratio? And of course, it would go up almost to 19% from 17.2%.
And trust us, we're not advocating for that. We
No.
just need you to know that it's an option.
We're not advocating for one either. I'm not. I'm only speaking for myself.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do each of these scenarios 1 through 6 assume that the $250,000 in cuts have been made?
Yes,
They're in the
Yes.
budget. So
So,
everything that we're looking at
all these.
assumes that we've already made,
We've made $1.5 million.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, it's a
Mhm.
fairly significant.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So all these
Cut.
scenarios are based on that 3.233 million.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Headland.
Scenario 5, some combination of applying fund balance, ARPA, debt. I guess I just spent, I don't know, too many times staring at my computer looking at this. What I came up with something that I don't know if it sounds feasible to anybody else, and if so, we can work in the numbers, but we worked in the past on a plan, a long-term plan as far as debt. I know Keith worked with us a lot, and I know you came in with it too, about the fact that of a scenario of, up to $3 million in borrowing if we needed to sustain ourselves, to help edge obviously inflation, which is out of control at this point, but obviously there's always gonna be some.
Right.
And with having frozen levy limits, somehow we have to move forward and stay in operation. I guess my thought for just a consideration is a consideration of, if you're going to issue debt, number one, you got to issue enough debt so that you cover the costs. Too low of issue of debt, you're going to have costs that are going to change that payback level in terms of percentage by a considerable amount. So I don't know how this works, but I guess my thought for consideration is a $1.5 million in debt and the rest from fund balance. And we move forward from there. That would still be only half of what we've thought of planning for the future in the past as a board. It would be a positive trend. And I think I I just think we don't, the scenario of not using too much of the fund balance scares me because of just what we're experiencing in costs. And I don't see them changing. You know, we may, this group of people who have prepared this for us have done a much tighter job than was done in the past. Last year, we were able to return almost $5 million. And that's tremendous. But because they have went through and already cut basically $1.5 million out of you know, any excesses, I don't know that we're gonna have any excesses. And we may experience overages. You know, and again, this is just a thought. Don't, you know, it's not cement in stone, but I guess I thought maybe it was something that might be considered by the whole board, and we would move on, but.
I'll note that the 3 million in debt issuance that we've been building in is mostly for the capital improvements.
Right.
And that was built into this budget with those expenditures covered by ARPA already.
Right.
Right.
So
But we still have a tremendous shortage when it comes to. the highway
Yeah.
department.
Right, and
um,
go
go
ahead.
ahead,
I'm sorry.
Beata, go ahead.
And I'm gonna skip over and then I'll come back to these
Okay.
slides because as I was looking at the debt and the CIP. So originally, when we built the CIP for 2023 through 2027. And I went through all these projects and we lined them up. It took me a while to then make sure that our debt stayed shy or close to that $3 million. Okay, but that's saying no debt in 2023, and that's been approved. That's a done deal. So now when we're borrowing the 1.5 million, right, is what, you know, so we need to be mindful too on what we're spending this money. So our investors, maybe I'm going speaking ahead of myself, but we all need to kind of go back and say, okay, if we borrow money, what are we gonna really dedicate this to? Because we don't want to borrow money to pay wages.
No.
And we don't want to borrow money to pay our copy machine expenses. You know, because our investors who are buying municipal bonds are not gonna like, you know, it's not a really good practice. So we would need to kind of revisit that and decide what we're going to buy. Maybe the shift between the ARPA and the debt. So there might be that opportunity. Does that make sense, or am I confusing you even
No,
further?
very much so.
Right,
Thank you.
okay. But I brought this slide in is because, you know, depending on how you're gonna use that ARPA money, it's going to have a future, even though we're done with 23 CIP, but what's going to happen in after 2023. So I just want you to guys, hopefully that helps some. So these scenarios, and one that was brought to my attention is scenario 3. I had applied ARPA, but scenario really 3 says issue 1 million and use no ARPA.
Yeah.
So I apologize, and I thank you for bringing that to my attention. But the reason I did this too is to kind of let you know where we are trending in our debt, because eventually we wanted to pay that debt down. Ideally would be have a ratio of 0, right? We have no debt. But eventually, if we keep going at that, but what this incorporates is like, yes, no debt in 2023. But in this graph, I built in that there will be $3 million for CIP moving forward for the additional upcoming years. So it's just, so I just want to make clear that's what this does. And eventually we want to go to as low as possible if we get to that point.
Yeah.
If no other surprises are there in the market. So this just kind of lets you know a trending way bigger picture. If we were to, so if you're thinking, you know, 1.5, because I did an amortization schedule for the debt repayment. It's a little bit tricky. It took me a while, but I think I got some of it
Even
figured out.
here you have 902,000. I mean, it could be 1 million,
Right,
whatever,
right.
you know. I
So,
don't think that, but I guess
but
I.
no ARPA, right? So
If
you're
no,
thinking,
yeah, no
yeah,
ARPA
okay.
change and no, but and I don't wanna not apply fund balance, because fund balance is return money from previous budgets where we did really well as a.
Right, and I'm gonna go
people in
back
the
to
county
that.
did.
Yeah,
And
and I'm,
it was kind of spent money that we, got back. So I think that makes sense to apply that, for future expenses, but I also am very hedgy about future of, sales tax could drop significantly if if
Yep.
some of this legislation gets done and we all got to pay back all the students' debt in this country or something, so. It could change in a
Supervisor,
hurry.
okay, Supervisor Johnson, I believe you were.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. Yeah, Vaughn, I'm personally, first of all, I want to thank you guys. You did a great job in this. But I just don't see any reason to borrow the money when we have them ARPA funds sitting there for 2024. That's personally my, use it now and you have built in, you say in your scenario, 3 million for next year for 24's budget. Is that correct? To borrow?
yes, I said,
Yeah.
there's a scenario that says issue debt for the whole thing. Right? I'm sorry. there's-
No, go back to your slide, if you.
Oh,
would.
yeah,
combination,
okay,
right.
and ARPA.
You said you had it
Use
built in
remaining.
for,
No, show that slide, where you have the ARPA balance.
The 1.56 applied.
Oh,
Number
yes.
4,
That,
number 4.
nope.
That one?
Scenario
Back,
four,
go back.
scenario 4 is got this.
Right there, you have
Issue debt.
issued debt in 24, right?
Right.
I personally, I just think, why not use the ARPA for 24 now? Don't borrow any money. And then go into this scenario for 24. The money is there. We're not making any interest on it right now, correct? Or are we?
Yeah,
On the,
Yeah.
on the
A little
ARPA?
bit.
yeah.
But if we borrow the money, you'll be paying more than what you're getting interest on. At one point,
I would say.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
But go to that, Beata, will you go to that last slide? This actually is the capital improvement plan that shows, so next year you
2020.
planned on borrowing $3 million and spending
oh, you did.
1.592 in
So
in
if we grab it,
ARPA.
if
So if you
we,
take that, you potentially bump your borrowing then to 4.5 million. What I would say about that is there is a bit of, and I don't want to sway your decision, but there is a bit of bird in the hand versus two in the bush or whatever that is, because we don't know. So for instance, I know that from going to the Health and Human Services Board meetings at this point in time, they're in a good solid financial position. It looks like they will return more than $1 million to the general fund. Now, that doesn't mean that the sheriff's department, or it's a terrible November and December in the highway department and they have to spend it to salt our roads. I mean, there still are some moving variables, but the later we get in the year, the less impact that some of those variables have. So we might well have, if for instance, we put $2 million back into the general fund at the end of this year, that would sway next year's planning. So it's just to be thinking about that thought that we have what we know now, and then we have all of the unknowns going forward, but those unknowns can shift somewhat dramatically in good and bad ways.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Johnson.
Beata, could you go back to your scenarios? Please.
tell me where to stop.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
There
the
it is.
narratives.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
okay. Was it,
So scenario 2 would be apply fund balance, but only for the salary and wages increase for those staff that we already have on payroll. Use ARPA to cover the new requests and the new positions, and 902,000 of that ARPA will cover the operating. So you will not maximize all the ARPA because we have 1.5, so we'll leave some on the table for 2024.
Thank you.
I know
But-
that at the last one of these meetings, we were generally of the opinion that the salary and fringe coming out of the general fund makes the most sense. So I think that, scenario 1, 2, 3 are really the main places where we want to be looking at.
So, yeah, 3 would be to use fund balance to cover existing wages and increases and the request for new positions. Use fund balance, which then leaves with 902 to close. And then decision would be then either debt or ARPA.
And so if we do have a good return, we could cover that 1.3 we take from next year's round of ARPA and still be solid.
So here, as far as what does that mean to our fund balance to the budget, it will go down to 52.6%. But it's still above what is required or recommended, should I say.
Supervisor Morehouse, did you?
Yeah, Vaughn, I didn't understand the last comment that you made. I did,
Because we are stealing from our CIP plan. If we go with scenario 3, down the road, we're gonna have 1.59 million, right?
That would be scenario 2,
For scenario.
because this would be a million in,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so
Yeah.
you're talking about scenario
Yeah,
2.
scenario 2. I'm sorry. I'm wrong.
No, that's okay.
Scenario 2.
This would be, we'll leave ARPA as is in our CIP. We'll just close the gap with borrowing. Approximately, my amortization schedule only did 1 million. I didn't go into 900,000, but give or take.
Yeah, you earlier,
Supervisor Quinn.
you noted that we shouldn't be borrowing money to pay for operating expenses or salary and stuff like that.
Right.
So the 902 in here, how would we be allocating that?
So basically, we have to look to, it will be looking at what we budgeted in CIP. CIP, we said, we're gonna use ARPA. If you wanna use ARPA and we wanna borrow debt, something that's going to
So
be
we're
of a
putting the
long-term
ARPA
type of investment,
debt.
it will be just shifting what out of this bucket of money, what we're gonna pay for wages. And because as investors are gonna look, well, what do you want to spend this money for? So we'll identify, we will
Yeah.
need to look at the projects, we'll look at what we put in our CIP, ARPA too. We have already, based on the CIP list that I have, I went through and identified, even though we can use ARPA as we see fit. So we can shift and says, okay, instead of using ARPA to buy this machine, we'll qualify for the debt. It's just shifting the money though.
Yeah, Supervisor Quinn, probably the most logical place if we were to borrow is to borrow towards the fairly large highway ask for this coming.
Yeah, I just. wasn't
Budget.
clear about that. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think we really need to do the highway asks, so. But Supervisor Quinn.
And so Chris, you made a note that a bird in hand is always valuable. So one advantage of not spending the ARPA funding, I would guess, is that these are uncertain economic times that we're going into, and we don't really know what's going to happen. So having ARPA available at whatever level we have, those are funds we can use for anything, and they're there for immediate use. Yeah, I think I can see some prudence in not using as much of those as we. Using all of those, at least anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe I should, but it was, if the keep in mind too, that is if you draw on the ARPA that is going to be in CIP in 2024, that money is not going to be there. So therefore it could increase your debt when it will be needed. So if you use ARPA of 900,000 that means you'll be adding that much debt. Could be using that much, adding at that much more debt in 2024.
So we've allocated those ARPA funds into our CIP in 24.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the obvious advantage of scenario 3 is that debt is getting more expensive, and it is likely to continue trending that way for the next year or two, at least, if the Fed is to be listened to. So debt right now is cheaper than it probably will be next year. Likely.
Again, without not attempting to influence you in any direction, because I think there are pros and cons to be made in a number of directions. But recalling that one of the benefits, if it's, one can even say a benefit of COVID, was the ARPA money and the COVID money, relief monies, which came to us. If that allowed us to return $4.8 million to the general fund, I would at least say a potential viable option is to use the 3.2 million of that to close the gap, not borrow, not take ARPA, and you still are $1.6 million more to the good than you were a year ago. So I'm always sort of robbing from Peter to pay Paul.
I can return to this slide. Sorry, it was probably making you dizzy. This one. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a trend to the left with our unassigned fund balance and activity, how we fluctuated in those anomalies in between in 2020 and 2021. You know, in 2019, I think what makes up 2.4 million, because there was a $1 million returned from DHS. Right.
Yes.
So now if you look at 2020, what happened was of the
Refinancing of the neighbor's debt. Mhm.
so it's kind of like anomaly there too. And then you look at 2021, it's like, boom, there's a 4.8 because of, but eventually if you look at, and it's not fair to look at 2012 because a lot has happened with inflation and all that. But, you know, COVID, we've got the grant, it helped offset some of the other expenses that we had. And this is where kind of will echo what Chris was saying, but I also like option 3. I mean, I know my opinion isn't a whole lot, but
Yeah, that's why we make the big
I
bucks.
think because the ideal thing here is to, you know, originally when we met with the CAP is to use that ARPA funds that are going to generate that, generate revenue or provide us dividends if that's increasing in service or some sort, instead of towards wages. I mean, I'm supportive of people getting paid the appropriate wages, but if from the financial side, you want to, I would, you know, looking at the ARPA, let's put it where it could make us money.
Let me throw one other little thought that just came to my mind about the thought of fund balance and where that all fits within that. You know, keep in mind that as we balance the budget, whether it's in borrowing or fund balance, really in any of these mechanisms, that's only utilized as needed. So you budget to that. But again, last year, we were able to return $4.8 million. I would imagine there was fund balance allocated to balance the budget
Right.
in 2021, but we didn't not only need that money, but returned $4.8 million. So if we're saying at this point, we need $3.2 million and we have a good year and there's $1 million returned, then you only need $2.2 million. So just to be thinking about the fact that a budget is the front side and the actuals are the back side. And, we may not need all that ARPA money, or we may not need the, to borrow, or depending on how the year plays itself out.
Okay, so, anyone else have, there we go.
Yeah.
A burning need to add something.
Yeah, just a quick question about the management actions that were taken, and you it says you eliminated one position request at the sheriff's department. And how did you come to that decision, and do you consult with them? And I know that the sergeant position that is still in there is $100,000 a year, and this one was only 36 or so.
We're just gonna send you over there to tell them.
Yeah, I don't want the sheriff mad at me. That's why I'm asking.
To his credit, the sheriff offered up the position. He really felt strongly that their greater need was in the sergeant position. And that the recreational officer, they do have staff, they have deputy staff that can fill in that role. That there are other costs that they would have to struggle to sort of fill, related to filling two positions, including a car, technology, just all of the different pieces of all of that, a squad, technology, radios, those kinds of things. And so he was very comfortable with offering up that as a mechanism of helping us,
Okay, thank you.
or you, I guess, helping you.
So in the interests of getting to some sort of decision sooner rather than later, is there anybody who's deeply attached? I'm going to try and narrow our decision space down here to 4, 5, or 6. Okay, so really we're looking at 1, 2, and 3. 1 is all fund balance, 2 is fund balance and ARPA, 3 is fund balance and debt. So I want to just get a general thumbs up. There may not be much point in having a lot more conversation about it. So thumbs up for scenario 1, just straight fund balance. Okay, that one's not real popular. So thumbs up for spending the ARPA with the fund balance. That's scenario 2. It does look like that. Supervisor Rogers, were you
Number
Okay.
2.
okay? And then scenario 3, which would be fund balance plus debt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I think we are looking then at scenario 3. If anyone wants to have one last death match argument against it, briefly, that would be the time. Okay.
Well numbered.
So,
Yeah,
Beata,
Yeah, keep in mind that vacancy ratio, we were really wanted to be safe on it, but right now we're trending at a 6 and we built in 2.5%. Even if it's that 3%, that could be significant. So like Chris alluded earlier, is what we're budgeting for as the year comes. We might have a savings there as well. So we might not need to borrow.
that would be ideal. So
But yeah,
Can- I think that scenario 3 is what we're broadly agreed on. That was the thumbs up, 6 out of, so I would suggest that we adopt a motion targeting scenario 3. if someone wants to make that motion.
In August, we should know better. We should have a better numbers to know if we're gonna borrow. Because we borrowed in August this year, 3 million. So next year in August, we're gonna have a better idea if we actually will need to borrow the 9 million.
Well,
Okay,
And then, yeah, maybe
Do-
not.
we might not.
How about 900,000 instead of 9 million?
Oh, did I
Yeah.
say 9 million? Oh, sorry, 900,000. I'm just adding zeros.
There's one- just- We'll call it $1 million for now. So. Do we? Are we comfortable with just sense of the room, or would we like a motion? Okay, so I would need the motion.
Okay, somewhat reluctantly, but here I am.
I know that feeling.
Moving in support of scenario 3 and the allowing the staff to move forward with additional detail.
All right, do I have a second to that motion? Supervisor Calabrese. And now back to the long part, further discussion. Certainly, Supervisor Quinn.
I didn't quite catch your explanation of how we may be in a position of not needing to actually apply for. Could you
Right.
explain that again?
We built a budget based on what we actually need. Again, we looked at our staff. Staff makes majority of our expense. We looked at the vacancy, assuming that out of those vacant positions, like if we filled every single position, we would need those funds. But we know that all the positions that we have vacant at any given time.
Ratio may change, a percentage may change.
Right. Yes, it's built in the budget for a positions, let's just say 1 FTE, 100,000. So it's here's expense and he says, yeah, it's gonna come out of levy, but if we don't fill it, there is no actual money or payment out the door. So we're just kind of assuming that
So what I'm wondering though is what is the process for making that decision? You're saying, you mentioned August as a date?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your
Well,
question
so
of the
how would
decision
you make a decision as to whether or not we
to borrow.
to borrow? Yeah.
Yes, so come August, we're gonna have probably July worth of financial information as far as actual expenses and revenue. So we would revisit to then get an idea as to where are we anticipating to end at the end of the year. So then that might be a decision to say, okay, let's just say maybe the gap is we might come in as turning back money to the general fund. As Chris Corpola said, depending on what grants are coming in, I mean, DHS, you guys could be $1 million. I mean, so that could easily close that gap, but there is a lot of unknown. But we should give
I
a
think
better.
$1 million is, I hate to say such a small amount of money, but it's such a small amount of money that the natural swings within the budget may well cover that $1 million, not resulting in us needing to borrow. Now, Nick made a point a moment ago, that we can't wait to August to initiate moving forward
Right.
with the thought of borrowing, but we can pull the plug on it right up to the day that the bond is issued. And we don't have to move forward with the debt.
Yeah, you can have a resolution authorizing it, much as we did
Yeah.
this year. And then, if staff is on top of the situation, it may be that only 800,000 is needed or 600,000 or nothing.
Right.
And that decision can be made at a time later on after we get financial advisors involved and,
Right.
Well, I'm
some help with the
yeah,
books.
I'm sensitive to Supervisor Johnson being outnumbered here and his having his sidekick stuck on a boat in France. So, but I wonder if would there be any sense to having the motion incorporate that idea that we could. I don't know how, I don't think we've ever done it that way, but the motion would be that I haven't thought about this. Basically, the idea that we are authorizing up to $902,000 in borrowing if needed. or something like that, or is that,
Well, I feel that since the motion is to adopt scenario 3,
is it that encompasses, that
I think that
encompasses,
would be
that,
encompassed as needed.
that's just the way it works, right? Okay.
Well, and you're also gonna get another, kick at the
Yeah, we get
cat because the resolution for borrowing would have to come forward. And then should ask for, and we should provide you with numbers
Right.
about what that borrowing, the need for that borrowing at that point in time.
And
That would involve bond counsel and.
no, I understand that. I just, what I'm worried, all I'm thinking about is the maintaining unanimity on the board if we can. And I know that there are gonna be people who don't want to do any borrowing. And I'm not really gonna push this, but I just thought somehow explaining this strategy would be helpful in swallowing their opinions if we have to. That can be done as explanation too.
Yeah, I include that in the framing of the resolution.
I believe that Supervisor Rogers is wanting to speak.
Supervisor Rogers, I'm sorry.
Yes, if I could just give you my opinion. I do not support the borrowing when we have the ARPA money, so I don't support the number 3, but we can continue now. Thank you.
Further speaking?
If I may, just quick, and just reread that right, but I realized what Mr. Quinn is saying, and I really consider that the opinion of all the members of this committee to be very valid. And I'm the same way. I don't want us to borrow money, but we have to have budgets that are flexible enough that in the end, we can pay all the bills. And we wouldn't borrow if we have a nice return, as Chris said, we may have at the beginning of at the end of this year, and our fund balance is remaining that healthy, there would be no reason to borrow the $900,000. We just bypass it and move on. So it's always only if necessary.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. I kind of was looking at number 2, Brian. But ARPA has a little more flexibility. I think we can use that for operating expenses, whereas borrowing, we really can't. And with the idea that we may not need to borrow, number 3, I feel a lot more comfortable with now. It could end up being the best of all possible worlds, but that's maybe rosy. I don't know. But so I feel comfortable with 3 because of those 2 things. ARPA is more flexible and we may not need to borrow. Thank you.
Any further speaking to the motion on the floor? All right, all in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
There we go.
Number
Motion
3,
passes. Number 3.
and we have at the end here. Can leave. No,
We had so much fun with this.
there you go.
Oh, nice.
Oh, no, I don't.
The set safety coordinator.
Okay, I wasn't sure how to minimize this, but I thought, and here we go, maybe this, I don't know how to, the screen on the side kind of blocked it, but it was a fun, you guys have a hard copy, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Biana. Thank you, Chris. That was a lot of work
Could I-
on your part. And
Could I just ask
job.
what you would like for my, as well as Beata's presentation, or thinking, what pieces or what would you like to come forward to the board next week?
Silence.
Maybe I can help a little bit, you received a summary from us and on the side.
Mhm.
So then the next step would be to then show you which areas or which department, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of, where's the borrowing gonna go? Where's the fund balance going to go? We can kind of identify that. I can break it out that way. So Because in the past, it just kind of identified, what are the other sources? What are you taking out of your general fund?
I think that makes good sense, and I would definitely include the that we are conservatively expecting the 2.82 vacancy rate, but currently and historically, it has been 6%. And if that holds, that would have, if you can have a rough number of how much that would save, and this may eliminate the need, eliminate or have the need to borrow, whatever the exact number is, I think that would be particularly useful for the board to know going in, and hopefully will address some of Mike and Brian's concerns, which I certainly share on some level.
I do too. And I think that probably in my mind, it would go towards highway tomorrow. Yeah. Does that
And that's
sound?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, pavement is expensive and we need a lot of it. Okay, Chris, Beata, does that give you what you need, or do you need a little bit more?
I think that's good.
Okay, that takes us through the end of the budget discussion and to reports from standing committees. Mike Rogers, I'm gonna go, Brian, do you want to go first, or? Yeah, Brian's got to get out of here for an important engagement elsewhere, so I'm gonna give you, and then I'm gonna get Mike so that he can go to sleep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The highway last met this morning. Commissioner Bender reported on Highway Z, reported that Highway Z paving has started October 3rd. A lime rock pad was installed for the O'Galley salt shed. Sand was screened in preparation for the upcoming winter. A public information meeting was held for the Highway B project. County H paving has begun this week. The committee took action on the Dunn County ATV/UTV route request, which would allow ATV/UTVs to travel on most, but not all, county roads. When the ordinance is written and reviewed and approved, it will be sent on to the full board. And I also would like to thank everyone that was on the bus tour. It was great. Missed ya? No, it's great. We had, I think there was 10 county board supervisors there, so it went good, and Dustin did a good job explaining everything.
Oh,
Had no-
yeah. Let me
clue on half of it.
second that. I've had a couple of people comment on what a good job you did.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So that's all I have. Next meeting will be November 9th, and
Thank-
please excuse me.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. You are excused. Supervisor Rogers.
We met last month on the facilities committee. I don't have my notes with me at the moment. I'm sorry about that. We began discussion on the lease of the recycle center, and we've moved forward with conversations on renewable energies. And we're still looking forward to resolving and coming up with a plan for the parks over the winter. That's mainly what we covered at this time.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Rogers. One quick question. Darren Wataki at Stout was interested in joining the discussion about leasing, and I was wondering if he'd gotten a hold of you yet.
He did get a hold of me, and he showed up at our last meeting and did speak at the meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's start over here. Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't suddenly remember the date that we met, but it was in, I think it was September 27th, because it was like right before the day before I left or whatever. Anyway, we did have a required public hearing on the human services budget. We did not have any member of the public providing testimony, but it did afford us a really, I think, valuable opportunity to go through the human services budget in some depth. And I'm grateful to Sarah Stabenow, who helped us sort of negotiate the links between the spreadsheets that we were downloading and what was actually accurate and so on. But anyway, and Sarah was away, so she took extra time to be with us and walk us through that. We had our regular reports from the Veterans Service Office, Public Health, and Human Services, and we are on track to return money, excuse me. We discussed in detail and approved our legislative agenda, which is gonna move forward. We looked at vouchers, excuse me, on this, approved, as to form RFP for the cooler at Stepping Stones. That's part of our CDBG grant and the budget adjustments. And we meet on October 27th.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Yeah, it looks like it was, looks like it was the 22nd. Cough drop? I never travel anywhere without them. Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, thank you. Reporting for the neighbors of Dunn County. No skilled nursing facilities in the area really are taking any new residents, according to Carmen. She let us know that. We have 7 of the 9 households full, with a couple closed for now. We've same problem always is finding people to work, but Chris and Jenna and Carmen have really been working together, brainstorming, coming up with some very interesting ideas and a few that have been implemented. They met and got Kelly and I up to date the other day. No, I'm optimistic, even though it's really tough for hiring people. And easier access now. You don't have to push the doorbell to get in. You can go in and all you have to do is wear a mask. You don't get checked. So go visit somebody. So, and we'll meet again this month, and that's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you. Judiciary and Law met September 26th, and we had the reports from the departments, and which included the resolutions that we talked about with child support, accepting that funding and rescinding the medical examiner assistant ordinance or resolution that we passed in 2016. And District Attorney Nodoff mentioned that she was going to have an interview for the assistant district attorney position after a long time searching. And then late last week, I got an email from her, and I will read to you because she wanted me to share it with everybody. I interviewed for the longtime vacant assistant district attorney position, the applicant I interviewed accepted a position in Dunn County. Dave Schneck will be starting on October 24th. He is a new graduate from Madison Law School and interviewed at several other district attorney offices around the state. However, his college roommate and high school friend is an ADA with our office. So I believe that really helped get him to come here.
Awesome.
So that's really good news. And we meet again on October 26th.
Thank you, Supervisor Calabrese. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I brought up before, most of our meeting in time waste was going over the proposed wage grid and also the health insurance benefits. Along with that, we did approve an out-of-class pay extension for UW. And that really had already been done. We just say good, sounds good to us. And of course reviewed and approved a long list of vouchers. Beyond that, we will be meeting again October 27th. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Headland. Supervisor Zons.
Supervisor Vons, to you. The Community Resources and Tourism Committee actually met yesterday. We got short report from the new Extension Director, Kristen Brewer, took over for Catherine Emmanuel. And then we had a real long extended report from Addison Vang, who many of you from Dunn County may know. He recently accepted the position back with Extension as a community educator, and he had some real detailed information about some of the programs that they've been doing as far as work with like among farmers and among entrepreneurs, and just really had a a whole wealth of information. We also touch a little bit on broadband, and apparently Extension is going to be adding like a broadband educator or coordinator or something along those lines. And he's kind of waiting to do anything along that kind of focus until he kind of sees where they might be going. But we have preliminarily set a discussion for broadband for our December meeting, hoping that, you know, he can kind of communicate back with what Extension might be up to, and then just kind of our own efforts here in Dunn County, especially with the county getting so many different grants. We didn't get as many grants this go around, and we're kind of speculating that that might be because Dunn County has gotten so many broadband expansion grants that the state may have just said, okay, these guys are getting too many in that county, perhaps. Supervisor Quinn had said he might actually be able to share some, do a little digging to kind of track down where some of that expansion is happening in the county. And then again, that's going to be during our December meeting. Also, our own illustrious county manager presented a real detailed report about economic development and what other counties are doing, how other counties are approaching it, and had some real good plans for how you know, how the county might be able to tackle it, how some of the different entities in Dunn County may have been at odds in the past, and maybe there's now a little bit more cooperative nature going forward, and how maybe we can kind of not duplicate efforts going forward with different entities maybe taking on different aspects of it. So we kind of have decided to, as a committee, to kind of move forward with that, and then hopefully do something with economic development that helps the county moving forward. And our next meeting is November 8th, Election Day. And that's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Zons. Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, we had 2 meetings in the past month. The second one was yesterday. We have reports from all the divisions, registered deeds, the survey, zoning and planning, and land conservation. Really good reports. We discussed a variance request. We have been getting a few of those. People want to do some expansion of their lots, but need to get a variance from the committee, the county. We discussed a possible amendment to the zoning code regarding allowing owner occupied housing in general commercial. Several towns have expressed concern that our code, they hadn't realized that our code allows for multifamily housing, non-owner occupied housing in general commercial zoning, and they had not incorporated that thinking into when they set aside land for general commercial. So they were asking us to consider a way to correct that problem from their perspective. So we're going to be, Ann provides us with a full report on that, and we're going to be exploring that in the future. And then just the discussion of the Lake District report, which we talked about earlier. That's all.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Anyone else have anything they absolutely need to touch on? Then our next meeting date will be November 9th. Thank you to Mike Rogers for going above and beyond from the far end of the world. Yeah. So, and our next meeting will also include a meeting of the Legislative Committee. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.